Welcome back. Let's get right back into it. So what is UX? What is user experience? Let's start by breaking down the definition. User experience design is the process of enhancing user satisfaction by improving the usability, ease of use, and pleasure provided in the interaction between the user and the product. Take a few seconds and read that again yourself. I'd like you to focus in on some of the words that stand out to you. What do they mean? What do the meanings bring to what your understanding of user experience design is? Pause the video and make a few notes. Now that you're back, let's break it down a little bit further together. Most students highlight to me usability in the middle of this definition, which is a very important part of user experience design. Without usability, which is a quality attribute, there can be no experience. Usability is very important, but usability just defines how great or poor the experience is on a sliding scale. When we look at the next term, ease of use, next to usability, that defines the efficiency. How easy is it? And I think most people that interface with digital experiences expect efficiency. They expect intuitiveness. That combination of usability, good usability, and efficiency or ease of use is what most people are aiming for when they create an experience. The next element that most people compare or break down, they focus on satisfaction. But I always encourage students to think about satisfaction not in isolation, but against the other attribute that we see here, which is pleasure. Let me ask you that question. What is the difference between satisfaction and pleasure? Ponder that for a moment. I'll tell you my interpretation. Satisfaction is that baseline expectation that most users have. When they visit a website or use an app, they expect to be able to complete the task that they have decided to do without any interruption, and they expect to get it done in a suitable amount of time and effort. That provides them the satisfaction that your experience needs. If we layer on pleasure, now we're creating advocacy. If a user leaves your experience saying, I got done what I was supposed to do, that's great. But if they leave your experience going, I got done what I was supposed to do, but it took me way less time, and it was so much easier, and wow, I loved it so much, I'm telling everyone about it, that is great experience. That will instill pleasure in your users and provide you with a much, much greater chance of them returning again. The other element of this definition that I want to highlight with you is the word interaction. There can be no user experience design without interaction. There's no experience if there's no action followed by a reaction. Without interaction design, there is no user experience design. That's where the term UX gets misused so much. Just because you're creating a website or something in the digital space doesn't mean you're doing UX design. It has to incorporate these types of elements that we're looking at on the screen right now. Interaction, action, reaction. Also, there needs to be a user and a product. It can't just be the product showing you things and doing things. There needs to be that touch point between user and product for it to be considered user experience design. That is a fundamental element that gets confused by most. And of course, this whole methodology is a process. It's a process mostly about enhancement. because we've all seen so many terrible experiences out there that need improvement. It's going beyond the accepted, the baseline, the benchmark, and it's taking it one step further. And that's what we're really going to get into throughout this course. Now, if you have any further questions about this definition, some of the meanings and some of the definitions that I've provided, please reach out to me directly. User experience design and experience design as terminology are both interchangeable. In the last few years, we've seen both used in tandem. When we think about experience design, effectively we're designing experiences. We're not leaving out the user, of course, the user is always involved, but experience design creates more of a focus and follows this process of researching, defining, designing, and measuring things that humans use. Human behavior changes on a regular basis. Humans may appreciate one experience one day and not the next, especially if you're designing at scale. Measurement, testing, learning, those are all important things that we'll get into throughout the course as well. So now you have a little bit of a grasp of what user experience design is, and experience design specifically from a process perspective. Let's start talking a little bit about why user experience matters. I'm sure you can probably answer this question quite easily. There's a predefined expectation that user experience will result in a better enjoyment of something in the digital space. If a user has a great user experience, they'll be enamored by your brand, you'll create loyalty, you'll have a much better potential for return. It's important. And beyond that, you've probably all seen bad experiences, and that's what motivates us. That's what is where the opportunity really lies, is for every great experience you've come across, you've probably encountered half a dozen terrible ones. I'm sure all of you have landed on a website, not known what to do. 5 seconds later, you went to one of their competitors or another option that came up in search. That's the reality of our experiences these days. So user experience is extremely important considering the saturation in the digital space. There's rarely ever a lack of competition. And with that strong competition comes a battle for customers. Let me tell you a little story about the space pen. When NASA started sending astronauts into space, they quickly discovered that ballpoint pens would not work in zero gravity. To combat this problem, NASA scientists spent a decade and $12 billion developing a pen that writes in zero gravity, upside down, on almost any surface, including glass, and at temperatures ranging from below freezing to over 300 degrees Celsius. What amazing innovation that NASA accomplished. Now, some people in the past have suggested that this story might be a myth. And that's not why I'm telling it. Why I'm telling it is that the Russians had slightly different ideas when it came to utilization of writing elements in space. What do you think the Russians put together for their cosmonauts? Well, I'll give you a little hint. It wasn't a $12 billion ballpoint pen. Now, why do I tell this story? Why is this useful to us when we discuss user experience design? The focus really for me when I tell this story, and I tell this to a lot of students and clients, is that intent is what matters. We spend too much time thinking about things in the physical space that would make sense in the digital space. Metaphors are great, but direct, literal interpretations are not. Needing to take a ballpoint pen that works in our gravity environment on Earth into space doesn't need to happen. What we need to think about is, what was the intent? The intent of writing something in space is to record. What other ways could you possibly record something where you wouldn't have to take something that works over here and move it over here? That's my biggest challenge when it comes to user experience design, is trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. That happens way too many times. And I challenge you to focus on user intent and use as you create experiences in the digital space. Use really does matter. What you're trying to accomplish, what does that thing do? That should be the question. What does that thing need to do? What does that element, that module, that functional piece need to accomplish? That is the question you need to ask. A chair you cannot sit on is not a chair. A phone you can't call someone with is not a phone. A phone is not a phone when product design is not supported by experience design. I use a lot of examples in the physical space when we start to talk about this subject matter, and these are some of them. But let me ask you this question. How many buttons does your blender have? I always think about a blender that my parents had. It had about 9 buttons on it. And I could never figure out why. Because when I needed to blend something, it was either going to be blended or not blended. My blender now has 1 button, on and off. And for me, that is perfect. Because I know if I want it blended more, I can leave it blending longer. I don't need 9 buttons of power to tell me that my milkshake will be smoother. But that's just me. There's so many other experiences that I've come across in the physical space where just simple user experience design would help. I'm sure you have a few examples yourself that you can think of when it comes down to use. And did that designer think about how a user would actually use their product? Think about a university website in this example that I'm providing, which is that juxtaposition of user needs and product objectives. In this example, we flipped the circles. On the left, we see the product objectives, the things that the university wants to show you. And on the right, we see the user needs, things people go to the site to look for. And you've probably seen these examples before. It's absolutely true. The university wants to show you something beautiful. A great promotional photo of the campus, events that are coming up, alumni in the news, some sort of value proposition or statement of amazing activities that have been happening, a letter from the president, something that allows you to get a tour of the campus. Whereas users that go to a site like that are looking for a contact information of a prof or a registrar, some sort of access to forms that they need to fill out, a campus map or ways to get parking. And those pieces of information are typically buried fairly deeply in the site. Why isn't it surfaced? Why is that not front and center in an experience? And the only thing that overlaps between user needs and product objectives in this case is the full name of the school. Now, this is a typical example based on some of the things that we've seen. There are obviously going to be exceptions to this rule, but I'm sure you can find a lot of parallels to this in industries across the board. What the user is looking for is what we're thinking of. We need to keep the user in the center of things. Use matters. Expectations matter. Intent matters. And that's where I'm going to leave you right now. We'll see you in the next video.